Okay, yo. Yeah, so today I want to talk about something that actually I have lots of conversations with multiple coaches um, and uh, various parents, uh, people at my workplace, my school. Um, yeah, just lots of people that have a vague interest in what I do, and that is when it comes to. I mean, it could just be combined events, but really, if you extend this logic outwards or inwards rather to individual events, I'm hoping people can possibly see what I'm going on about. So as a bit of a preface to all this, um, now when we're talking about combined events, multi events, they're used very interchangeably, multi-events, combined events. And I would like to make a distinction between the two. And again, I'm probably the only one that hammers this point, I feel. But to me, multi-events is when you're doing multiple events. So if I were a multi-event coach, I could be a sprints multi-event coach. So I could coach 100 meters, 110-meter hurdles, 60 meters, 200 meters, 400 meters. And you could probably argue, oh, but they're all just sprints. That's not really multiple events. But I think some sprints coaches would argue that there is a massive difference between the 60 meters and 200 meters. There is even a massive difference between the 100 meters and 60 meters. Um, there is a lot of overlap, don't get me wrong, but some would argue that, yeah, there is a difference. You could be a throws multi-events coach. You might be a shot put, discus, and hammer coach, or you might be an all-round coach for throws, so shot, discus, hammer, javelin, or you might just be javelin and discus. Or you might be a horizontal multi-events jumps coach. So you might just only be interested in long jump and triple jump, and maybe sprints. The point is, multiple events are just literally a collection of events that the coach wants to coach, essentially. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's absolutely fantastic. You know, it's you're essentially enriching people's lives with your knowledge and letting them enjoy the sport that I absolutely love. So, it's great. Um, Whereas combined events is the specific combination of events. So the decathlon is the specific combination that everyone has agreed on. IAAF, all those organizations, and it's been ratified as the 100 meters long jump, shot put, high jump, 400 meters, 110-meter hurdles, discus, pole vault, javelin, 1500. In that order, spread across 2 days, the first five on one day, second five on the other. If it's 10 events and it's not those events, and they were interchanged in some way or swapped out for other events, that is no longer a decathlon, even though it's a 10 event competition. Okay, so combined events are a specific combination of events. And being a combined events coach is being acutely aware of how to train for those specific events in that specific order, how to best get the optimum performance out of your athletes while doing those competitions. So when people say, are you a multi-events coach, are you a combined events coach? They probably look at me a little bit weird saying, no, I don't do multi-events, I do combined events. And they're probably thinking, what? They're the same thing. But now you understand a little bit. And again, I'm not trying to force terminology down people's throats and stuff, but to me, that's the distinction in my mind between multi-events and combined events. So yeah, if you say, yeah, I need help with multi-events, I'm not going to be like, rah, rah. I'm just like, yeah, cool, but yeah. So anyway, moving on. So there's a lot of debate, I feel, and it's rather not debate, but I think it's more. I wouldn't say confusion, but it's not crystal clear as to why you would have a one coach model versus a multiple coach model when coaching combined events. And to be fair, the arguments I'm going to be presenting could be presented to, you know, any event. You could argue, well, would you want just one shot put coach, or would you like multiple shot put coaches? And to with a pinch of salt on this, the answer that I come to is it's largely down to personal preference, but you have to understand the advantages and disadvantages of both models. And for me personally, the one coach model vastly outperforms the multiple coach model. But I feel that the multiple coach model could work as well. And it has worked for other people. The most notable example is our British record holder, Daley Thompson, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But I think the main purpose of this video is just to make you more aware, even if you're probably thinking about this already, but just more aware of the pros and cons of each type of coaching setup. So let's talk about the advantages and disadvantages of the one coach versus multiple. So for one coach, on the one hand, the one coach model, you're going to get one consistent, clear message on everything. You would assume that unless the one coach is a little bit cuckoo and constantly flip-flops on their opinion, if they have one opinion and they stick to it, then on the plus side, that's going to be one consistent, clear message. And consistency and just being able to deliver a clear message is, to me, is so important when it comes to helping youngsters, people that are right at the bottom end of the sport. And to be fair, it's not just youngsters, it can also be for more senior athletes that have got a single vision in mind and just want supreme focus. So yeah, it has advantages there. The disadvantages of the one coach model is it's heavily dependent on that one person actually knowing what they're talking about. Essentially putting all your eggs in one basket. So I'm hoping that makes logical sense in terms of, well, if you just have one coach and they're not very good, or they're not getting the results out of you rather, or they're not working in an optimal way, then you've kind of set yourself up for a bit of a bad time. Whereas if we look at multiple coaches, the underlying assumption would be that they would have a higher level of expertise, given that that's their specialism. But it's not always the case. Let's put that out there. I've known some combined events coaches that I would quite happily take their individual event experience over single event specialists any day. I think one of the classic cases who's coached combined events is Aston Moore. You could argue he's a triple jump and horizontal jump specialist, but he has coached some good combined eventers, and you know, many combined eventers come over to him. Essentially, he's a good coach. I genuinely believe if you're a good coach that's, you know, reflecting all the time, constantly in pursuit of knowledge, and upgrading yourself and all those kind of things, I think good coaches like that can turn their hand to anything really and get a fairly large degree of success. So on the plus side, you would expect, you know, a higher level of expertise, but the caveat is not necessarily. But the main pitfall for having all of these voices is there's all the voices. So unless there is a real cohesive structure for all these coaches, and they literally sit down and have a meeting regularly, and the longer the delay between meetings, that means the longer between giving feedback, and you need to really close down on that feedback loop in order to make like really significant, impactful changes to an athlete. So they need to sit down regularly, and there needs to be a structure, and they need to agree on technical points, plans, schedules, all the rest of it. So I think that's possibly why American universities, American schools do particularly well, because of their organization. They have multiple coaches, but they're always working almost like a faculty of teachers in a way. And it becomes very data driven, numerical. And athletes get looked after because they're essentially put into various holding camps, if you like, looked after by certain specialists at certain times. And there's just a structure. And I'm sure that these staff will just meet up at staff meetings and it just gets done. Whereas I often see the case with combined eventers, you might have a lead coach and then you might have a couple of other coaches that you just turn up to. And it's not uncommon for all of these different coaches to not be 100% in sync. They might not even be communicating that often. I know, for example, that a couple of my athletes have other coaches. Well, okay, they have a lead coach and I'm the other coach. And despite me reaching out a few times, it's like, right, okay, how can I help? What do you want me to do? Like, not even in the sense of a leadership contention, just literally entirely subservient. I'm here to help. What do you want me to do? And it's finding the time. I mean, because if you didn't have that organization and you're not doing that for multiple athletes, then you're expecting 5 or 6 coaches to hold committee meetings over one combined event athlete. And many coaches are busy people. They've got lives, they've got other things going on. It's not their full-time job. And it's very hard to justify a couple of hours every week for one athlete of just sitting around and finding the time. And yeah, it's just difficult. Like, unless it's truly structured, the organization, it's just massively a no-go. So looking at actually how the sessions are delivered, when you are in a combined events coach, the athletes all turn up at one place, and over the period of 1, 2, 3 hours, whatever it is, that combined events coach can go through multiple events without having to go to other venues, having to wait for other groups to finish. They can essentially do their training without delay, all in one big long session, made up of lots of little exercises and sessions. The downside to this is it takes a lot of work for that one coach to set up, to liaise with the track staff. In my experience, the combined eventers have to fit around other people because individual coaches kind of set up base and it's like, we shall not move. And, it's very difficult to deal with. And it's very hard to justify using a space if you've got a small combined events group versus, say, a sprints group that has like 50, 60 athletes, especially youngsters that need the space. And from a moral point of view, it's like, oh, these are kids, they deserve to have a bit of fun and train. And on the other part, it's a financial issue, because if the track staff see you hogging it and you're only bringing in 4 or 5 tickets versus another group, which could be potentially bringing in 50 or 60 tickets, they're losing a lot of revenue prioritizing you over them. And so combined event groups, you do have to be flexible. And it just takes a lot of planning and good organization, but you can sort it out. It can be done. You just have to be on top of it. The converse is true with individual coaches, with the multiple coach approach. So when you have these specialists, these experts in their field, they often just set up shop. It's nice and easy. So if I was a high jump specialist and I was training combined eventers, I just plonk myself down at the high jump area and I'm just going to sit there. I'm just going to sit there, let them come to me. I'm going to train my other athletes, my other high jump specialists. And it's so minimal in terms of event planning. I mean, you can whinge like, oh yeah, I need to think about exercises. Yeah, okay. What about a combined events coach that has to do that for 10 events? Okay, I'm sorry, it's not the same. Like you have a significantly lighter workload when it comes to planning and preparation. Oftentimes you'll book in and you'll face struggles like everybody else, but it is, in my opinion, that specialists get what they want. because often they're offering a unique service to the club, and it's usually uncontested. If I was a high jump coach and I went down to a club, I might be the only one high jump coach. There might be another one, but that's about it. And so if I trained different days, because they might not train every day, then automatically, if I'm the only other high jump coach there, I get the area on those days. And so fantastic. The downside of having individual coaches is they're going to have, I doubt very much. I mean, it has happened, but I doubt very much these individual specialist coaches are going to be there just to train combined events athletes. They're human. They want to, help athletes that share the same passion as them. And if they're going to see, let's take the high jump still as an extended example, these athletes that are really good at high jump, then of course they're going to be more interested in helping the high jump only. And also what I kind of alluded to earlier, you have to assume that all of this team work at the same place. They might not be. I know quite a few combined event athletes that travel around a lot, and they go to various different venues. And so what that means is sometimes you're lucky and you might have two or three coaches that are the same venue, and you can kind of plan it so you can spend a bit of time and you hop from one to the other. But sometimes is the case, you can only do one event a day because there's only one coach at that one event venue doing one event. And so you're limiting your own planning if you're organizing yourself from a combined event point of view, and you're limiting your opportunities for development, really. Whereas a combined event coach will just do it all. You don't have to worry. You just turn up and you know that because they're planning for the whole combined events, that it's just going to get taken care of. I know from experience because I juggled through a lot of coaches. As I said in the previous video, 52 individual coaches. 2 of them were actually combined event specialists. And yeah, it was the biggest nightmare. Put it this way, it was a massive nightmare, yet those individual coaches were some of the nicest, most accommodating people ever. So even if the coaches are amazing, they're accommodating, they'll do whatever you ask them to, it's still ridiculously hard sometimes to actually organize it together, and get a combined event set up actually working that way, in my experience. I mean, if you can get it to work, that's absolutely fine. One of the benefits of being a combined events coach is they will have a general overview of how all the events link together. And when they're planning their sessions and we're doing exercises, you actually focus on what I call the power movements. Okay. And so that is a subtle difference between what a specialist would do and what a combined events coach would do. And I think that's the real hallmark of a good combined events coach, is working on these power movements and really getting them driven home. And the reason why you do that is because they're easily transferable. So by training in those movements, you're training multiple events at the same time. And thus you're getting the most bang for your buck, you're optimizing your time, and you're just generally making the most amount of progress in the shortest amount of time. The problem with that is sometimes it can be seen as a little too efficient. Athletes might raise an eyebrow and they might say, what, we've only been here 20 minutes, half an hour. Like, that's not right. I want to spend a bit more time. Or, even individual events. Specialists might go, yeah, we usually spend about an hour and a half doing something, maybe 2 hours, maybe 3. It just depends on the session or whatever. And there seems to be a real misconception that the more time you spend on something, the better the results. Where quality and intensity, especially in an explosive set of events like combined events, is what's more important. If you want to just do a 3-hour session, just go to the park and run laps for 3 hours. That's going to be a fairly low intensity. I'll be surprised if you can run for 3 hours straight, and brutally honest, that is a long, long time running. But combined events is primarily a explosive set of events over 2 days. So there's this weird paradox of each individual event is working the alactic primarily, the anaerobic, and then in the vast minority of cases, the aerobic systems. So it's all short burst stuff, but that's contrasted with you have to be in that constant state of explosiveness for 2 whole days. And so that's the challenge. And a combined events coach will understand that challenge and train the athletes accordingly. Well, I like to think so, they would anyway. Multiple coaches, again, they're going to have a deep and broad understanding of their specialist event, as you'd expect. Not necessarily the case, but yes, they're going to very least have passion for it, which you can't rival. But conversely, they might spend too much time on their event. And more importantly, they might diagnose problems that other coaches in the setup, unless they're communicating well, other coaches in that setup might have actually remedied, or worse, they've actually encouraged. So say, for example, you have a multiple coach setup, and I'm just making this up on the spot, but let's say you've got a long jump coach, all these different coaches, and while doing the long jump, your long jump coach is trying to get the knees up and kick the feet out a little bit to get this cycle. So your hamstrings are pulling on the ground, and the long jump coach believes that that is optimal running, high velocity running, to optimize horizontal velocity and therefore jump further. And so the feet are starting to kick out past the knee. Whereas the sprint hurdles coach might look at this style of running, because now the athlete is like, oh, I like this. This is fast running. I'm going to do this between the hurdles, or I'm going to do this out of the blocks. And then when you start seeing the feet kick out past the knee, especially from a good block drive, where if anything, the feet should be behind the knee, making this weird, for me anyways, these sawtooth marks and really exploding the ground. The sprint hurdles coach might say something along the lines of, what are you doing? Don't do that, please. And so whether this is technically accurate or not, it could be very likely that one coach wants one thing, another coach wants another, and they might not even realize it, but they're trying to fix each other's mistakes. And so essentially the athlete is caught in the middle of it, and it's not very athlete centered. And so the athlete is either going to be extremely confused, or it's just a little bit of mental load where the athlete has to go, right, okay, it's high jump time, I have to do it like this. Long jump time, I have to do it like this. Hurdles time, I have to do it like this. And you're essentially giving the athlete more work so that they have to get into certain mode. Whereas a combined events athlete, it should just be not separating the events, but the combined events coach should be like, look what they've all got in common. Can you see why we train like this? Because they all do this. They all work similar energy systems. They've all got these power movements. And it's such a powerful thing when the athletes recognize that, and it justifies training. They get on board, they can see the relevance for it, and you're just going to lead to better outcomes. Whereas multiple coaches, that might not necessarily be the case. So when it comes to fault finding, which is the easiest thing to do because, you know, everyone's a critic, but with combined eventers, coaches, I mean, if we're going to be really negative against the single coach model, and I'm more than happy to completely belittle the single coach model and completely big up the multiple coach model, and assume that the combined events coach doesn't know what they're doing necessarily, whereas the multiple coach model, all of the coaches are complete specialists and know what they're doing. It could be the case that the single combined events coach is an absolute genius, and all of the individuals in the multiple coach kind of know what they're doing. And so I kind of feel like the best case, worst case is it becomes fair when the one coach model, they don't know what they're doing, and the multiple they do. And it's completely one-sided if the one coach does and the multiple doesn't. So what do I mean by that is, well, if the one coach model, let's suppose the combined events coach kind of knows what they're doing, but doesn't know much. Well, doesn't know the events in that much detail as maybe an individual specialist would. At the very least, they would be able to spot patterns across individual events. They would get a larger, bigger picture of how the athlete's developing. Whereas an individual events coach, they'd probably have like what I call an eye. So they'd be able to spot common technical mismatches in their event really quickly, but they wouldn't know, or they wouldn't care, sadly, how that fits in with the other events. And they just want to see, nope, I want my high jump to be my high jump. I don't want to see this combined events business. If you want to jump high jump properly, you need to do it more like this, or this kind of way, or along these lines. And so the combined events coach, the single coach approach, they can get a bigger picture of finding technical mismatches and fix them immediately, live feedback. The problem is that, again, it's an expertise and skill thing. They've got to have a very good, broad, but not necessarily beyond basic idea of how the events work. So 100 meters long jump, shot put, all of those events. But they also have to understand all the different components of physical performance, like flexibility, mobility, stability, core strength, plyometric, maximum strength output, maximum velocity, all that kind of stuff, and know how that ties in with performance and how increasing, or in the very rare case, decreasing one. I've got an athlete who is so flexible, almost too much so. And you often get that when young girls come from a gymnastics background. They're almost too flexible, and they're getting into positions that athletes would love to get into. Even top class, world class athletes don't, and these young girls don't need to, and they kind of overextend a lot of the time, and it causes poor performance. So sometimes you have to reduce flexibility, and that can take time. So yeah, with multiple coaches, they can, as I said before, they may have a well-trained eye. And personally, I don't trust my eyes. I need to see video evidence. Classic example where I don't trust my eyes. You've ever done the pen trick where you've got a pen and you kind of wobble it like that, and you look at it after a while and it looks like the pen's like flapping, it's bending, but clearly the pen is like a solid rod. It looks the same. And so the way our eyes and brains interpret images are slightly off. And I can't help but wondering, when you're watching these athletes moving pretty fast, and they don't have to be particularly good or senior to be moving fast enough to get that kind of effect. And you can miss things. And the more you pay attention on one particular part of their body, then you miss something else. Whereas with video analysis, you can see it straight away. You can rewind and look at it again, slow motion, all this business. And to be honest, mobile phones are so ubiquitous that, this is technology that didn't exist 20 years ago. So why aren't you using it? It's not like we're using video cameras that are thousands of pounds and hardly anyone can afford them. In British society, you'd be hard pressed to find a youngster that didn't have a mobile phone, or an adult that didn't have a mobile phone. I mean, I'm being not insincere. Maybe I'm being insensitive here. But yeah, mobile phones are pretty ubiquitous, and so you have a very powerful tool in your pocket. So why not use it? So yeah. So really, one coach models are incredibly effective. Incredibly effective. But it's largely down to how capable that one coach is. You're essentially putting all your eggs in one basket. And the multiple coach approach is also incredibly effective when done properly as well. Good examples of that happening we'll see in a second, but the main ones, and I think this is why a lot of youngsters go to American universities, or one of the reasons. I mean, one of the reasons is because of the whole semi-professional atmosphere and the great venues and the great training facilities and all this stuff, and the idea of sponsorship and becoming a professional athlete and all this business, which just doesn't exist in this country. But I think the other thing that is impressive to them is they'll feel they're being looked after, because there'll be faculty of staff looking after that athlete, and they'll have meetings, and yeah, they'll just be looked after in such a good way. So multiple coaches, that approach, I feel it can be effective. There's clearly lots of examples where it has been effective, but it's only when they're a team and not a collection of individuals. If they're just a collective of individuals that don't talk to each other, it's not going to work long term. You might find success in individual events for a while, but I often find when athletes go from pentathlons to octathlons and then finally to decathlons, especially in the boys, they can't handle this multiple coach business. And I often find that when girls move up to heptathlons and then heptathlons at under 20 senior level, where all the weights and the heights go up, and the 100-meter hurdles and all the rest of it, then it starts to flake a little bit. My personal preference is clearly the one coach model. And the reason for that is because I feel like the main drawbacks for the one coach model, that you need someone experienced and with expertise in all the events, I feel I cover. I've been doing athletics for nearly 30 years. I've done every single event many, many, many times, as evidenced by my power of 10. I've competed at the National Athletics League, the BAL, the British Athletics League, as it used to be called, for nearly 20 years. I've done everything. I've done triple jump, steeplechase, the Ks, the 5Ks. Yeah, I've had to do events that I did not want to do and I was not trained for. But at the time, I was a fit enough young man, I could get away with it. And yeah, of course, I did my events as well. And also, because I'm a teacher, I feel I'm fairly organized. And because of my love of the sport, I feel I'm committed. Now, there's some coaches that can't give up as much time as I do. For the record, I coach 7 days a week, every day after school, Monday to Friday, and then both weekend mornings. And I coach at 3 different venues: Canterbury in southeast Kent, Bromley in northwest Kent near London, and Kingston in southwest London. I'm doing in the region about 400 to 500 miles a week. It's burning a hole in my pocket when it comes to diesel, but I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. I am 100% committed, and that commitment to me is easy work. I actually feel honoured. To perfectly be reasonable with you, I'm honoured. I get to work with these enthusiastic youngsters that truly love the sport and they want to improve. And if I can help them with their opportunities and development, that's fantastic. As I said before, I've had a lot of coaches, 52. The reason why I can accurately say 52 is because last year, when there was the Coaches Week, National Coaches Week, and Blackheath asked all of the coaches to give a short video. You know me, I can't do a short video, but essentially I thought, oh man, how many coaches have actually had? And then I sat down and I just listed them all out chronologically. And by the time I counted, I was like, 52. And part of me thinks well, yeah, no wonder I never really got past county level, because I never really had anyone longer than a year or two. And I was constantly juggling 4 or 5 different coaches, because a lot of coaches don't know what to do with combined eventers. They'll hang on to them if they're good, maybe, but they just don't know what to do with them, which is sad. And so hopefully the point of this series of videos is it gives athletes an idea of the challenges of coaching you lot, and also maybe it gives coaches a bit of an insight of what you need to do. I'm no expert, by the way, but I feel like my recent run of successes I at least want to justify what I've been doing. This is more going through my rationale, justification, just to show that it's not a fluke. This was all deliberate, which I believe it was. And so what I personally believe is structure and consistency is the name of the game here. Some people put emphasis on like, oh, this is the national coach for high jump. Oh, this is the national coach for pole vault. Yeah, if we just get them linking together with my athlete, they'll no. You do far better with someone who kind of knows what they're doing, but could commit and go and has the time to go, right, I'm going to organize something for you. I'm going to stick to it, and we're just going to work steadily towards it. That will work so much better than, say, for example, like the national pole vault lead or whatever, and they go, oh yeah, there's the Europeans, I've got to go away for a couple of weeks to support my athletes, or oh, there's this big competition coming up, oh, I've got to do a conference. Oh, these leads, they're busy people, they're in demand. It's not just, put it this way, combined eventers are at the bottom of their list of priorities. They've got major international athletes to be looking out for. They've probably got coaching seminars where they're helping other coaches and all the rest of it. Yeah, I hate to break it to you, but combined events are low on their priority of people to help. And so to me, it's not about unloading technical knowledge on people to the athlete. It's not about, not just about, should I say, giving feedback in such a way the athlete will whatever, or even having a particularly good relationship with the athlete. I've seen coaches that do not get on with their athletes at all, and it's really awkward. But they produce results, and the athlete clearly loves the sport because they're still in it, and they're seniors. But to me, the most crucial thing is that coach has to be able to facilitate the conditions for that athlete to improve. It's got to be the conditions that would allow an athlete to improve. And sometimes that just means just letting them get on with it, just not interrupting, especially when you're talking about like their development cycle, like where they are on a stage of competency. So if they're consciously competent, as opposed to unconsciously incompetent and consciously incompetent, when they're consciously competent, they know what they need to do. You need to help them figure it out intrinsically, like they're listening to their own body. You just stay out of their way. So sometimes being a great coach is just making sure the equipment's out, and then they can take care of the rest. It doesn't necessarily have to be you're on the sideline and go, yeah, oh, yeah, great job, yeah, all that. No, sometimes it's just nothing. Sometimes you're literally just getting the equipment out, and you're just there for either reassurance or they'll talk to you in their own time. Something just happens. So without being too negative on the multiple coach approach, I'd like to give a case study in a positive light for multiple coach. And that is, of course, Britain's, in my opinion, Britain's greatest all-round athlete, or just Britain's greatest athlete of all time. And that's double Olympic gold medal winner, Daley Thompson. One of my sporting heroes. I think not just from a performance point of view, but I think just from every single interview and video footage, just the way he conducts himself, the way he talks. It's a very cheeky, confident manner he's got, but it's never what I'd consider offensive, just very like politely confrontational, if that's the way. Amazing mental fortitude. I think one of the interviews I saw of him was Jürgen Hinzmann, the tall German athlete who was his main rival through the 80s. I probably butchered his name, but he said in an interview, he went up to him after Jürgen Hinzmann, I think he'd broken the world record at that time between Olympics, and Daley was ticked off or something like that. I can't remember the setup, but essentially Daley said, yeah, I was going to beat you by this much today, but after what you just did, I'm going to beat you by this much. And he was just, he just funny, confrontational, a superb athlete. And from what I can read about him, and bearing in mind, I've never met the guy, I've never had a conversation. I'm not going to claim to know how he trained. I don't particularly care, to be perfectly honest. It'd be nice in like kind of a, curiosity kind of way, but it's not irrelevant. But I can kind of figure out what he did based on his performances. They're usually a good indicator. But by the looks of it, he had Rob Mortimer first, and then Frank Dick, who's a vice president of Blackheath Harriers, as the lead coach. But he worked with many other great coaches, including notably Bruce Longdon, who had many, many, many high-performing athletes that went to many major championships. And so I think possibly what I'm reading into it here is that Daly had a lead coach who was the main organizer, which I'm guessing is Frank Dick. And then Frank farmed it off to maybe some individual coaches, maybe. I'm not sure. I'm not going to claim to be, but it's interesting that there was an interview with Daley Thompson that Sky Sports News did January 2013. And Daley Thompson actually said it's good for athletes to change coaches every 3 to 4 years. Which is interesting. Completely flies in the face of developing some kind of long-term consistency. I don't know whether he's saying that just so he can spook people up and make sure they never touch his British record, or whether he genuinely believes it. Well, only he will ever know the answer to that. But at the very least, he said that on record. And so I think for him, not only multiple coaches, but like a changing roster of coaches is something that he advocates, which to me is incredibly interesting, considering he's the UK #1 all-time double Olympic gold medalist in the decathlon. And his point score has not been touched since the 80s. We're now in the 2020s, like 40 years, and no one in Britain's come close. I say that. Dean Macy got pretty close with 8,600. Dean was a phenomenal athlete. And then I think there's this guy called Tim Duckworth, who's mainly based in America. He's an American with British-born parents, I think I read somewhere. I don't know. But he represents GB. He's scoring the 8.3s, I think. I'm not quite sure what he's doing now, but he's a good decathlete. And then I think the next couple of big things were Ashley Bryant with 8,100, and he did some good stuff. And then Daniel Ord, 8,000 points. I can't remember if it's 8,000 or 8,001, but I remember him going to the London 2012 Olympics. But right at the top, really, it's Daly and Dean, and then a bit of a jump down. But in terms of British athletics, scoring 8,000 points is pretty elite by our standards, even though American universities seem to crank them out like an M&M factory. But 8,847 points, Daley Thompson's record. That would still do well today at major championships, even though the world record has gone on a couple of hundred points since then. 8,847 points is still pretty world class. Like, it's just incredible. Fantastic athlete. So just to hammer in a few more points about this, a typical specialist group may use an arsenal of drills, exercises, maybe as a warm-up, maybe as part of the activity session, an intervention strategy, maybe, I don't know. And it is typically common for these coaches, as I said before, to host sessions anywhere between 1 and 3 hours. The training documentation that UKA used when I was qualifying to be a level 2 coach stressed that it's not about the time, but they were expecting a couple of 20-minute sessions, a warm-up, a cool-down. And so just doing the maths, that looks to be about an hour and a half, an hour and 20, hour and a half. The time specifically isn't being criticized here. If you need 3 hours to do a pole vault session, you need 3 hours. If you only need 1 hour, then it doesn't particularly matter. I think the focus should never really be about time. unless you're trying to fit a sneaky session in before getting on a plane. But yeah, but combined eventers are really, really focused on time, especially youngsters, because they can only really train in the evenings after school or at weekends. They can't train during the day. Their time is fairly limited. And you've always got to be thinking, how do I get the most bang for my buck? And so my silver bullet to that is, and it's not a secret, but I almost feel like not many people do this, so it might as well be a secret, is the strategy I call little and often. Little and often. So that means that after suitably warming up, we spend about 25 minutes to 40 minutes per event. So we can usually get 3 or 4 events done in a 2 to 3 hour session, and then a couple of those sessions a week. And especially with youngsters, they have done all of the events at least 2 or 3 times that week. And happy days. You know, they're constantly churning it out. Whereas I feel you can't do that with individual coaches. You know, it just doesn't work. You either train multiple events in the day or you train multiple days in the week. Anyway, so little case study. I don't know if you're interested or not, but Joshua Darko on the left in that picture, and Oliver Downs on the right in that picture. Let's see if I can move me out of the way. Oh, is that me? See if I can. There you go. So Oliver Downs on the right, Joshua on the left. What does their typical week look like? They might train twice a week. They might train 3 times a week. And during that, they're here for 2 to 3 hours. 3 hours is a bit long. 2 hours is the minimum, somewhere around there. And they'll do 3 or 4 pentathlon events a session. We'll always start with hurdles. But yeah, they'll just get the events done. We'll finish with the sprints, maybe some medicine ball work, some conditioning. But the heaviest ball I've ever let either of them touch is 6 kilos. I'm not a fan of weights at this age. I want them to learn the movement patterns first before thinking about muscles. They're still learning the trade. And yeah, you want to look at how successful they were. The indoor pentathlon champs, they won first and second by such a long margin that if neither of them had run the final race, the 800, they still would have got medals. I think Josh would have come second and Oliver would come third. They were just that far ahead of everybody else. Yeah, phenomenal. It was just a masterclass. They were all just technically so proficient at all the events. They didn't need to be physically developed yet. It looked like they'd just done their homework, to be honest. And so the analogy would be that it's not necessarily the smartest kid in the class that does well on the test, but it's the student that has prepared the most for the test that would succeed. It doesn't necessarily have to be the smartest, just has to have prepared.